Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be with you again this morning as we come to worship God, as we come to fellowship with one another. And it's good to be in the house of the Lord. I don't know where else you want to be this morning, because there are a number of other places you could be. So thank God you chose to be here. And we're grateful to God that you are here. I just want to, I know this is throughout the worship service, we have different moments when we do different activities. There is a process, or there is a component for information sharing and for fellowship. Part of the information sharing was led by Deacon Joy Livermore this morning. She did mention the evangelistic services that are due in March, and part of the preparation that we are encouraging the church to be involved in. And one of the specific area of involvement is in the area of prayer, and we really want to emphasize this and to incorporate the whole church community, particularly the classes, to offer leadership in this area. So as I say, there's a section in the service for information sharing, so I'm just pulling over a little of that because this section is for sharing the word. But I'm just highlighting this in the area of prayer, and all the classes are being asked to pray specifically for different components of evangelism campaign. Class 1, for example, is being asked to pray for planning and coordination. Class 2 for effectiveness of the support team. Class 3 for preachers. Class 4 for the salvation and restoration of unbelievers. Class 5 for the salvation and restoration of unbelievers and congregants. And Class 6 for logistical services and environmental factors that will impact the evangelistic meetings. So we see every single class. And so I ask that at the end of the service you speak with Mr. Gail Sr., who will give you more information on this so that the class leaders will be able to lead the classes appropriately in these areas so that everyone is on board. Continuing, I'd just like to invite you to turn to just a few additional verses in Mark 1. From verse 16, Mark 1, verse 16, I'm reading from the NRSV. Jesus passed along the Sea of Galilee. He saw Simon, his brother, Andrew, casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fish for people." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. As he went a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, sorry, I just want to back up a little. Let me go from verse 9 actually. In those days, Jesus came from Nazareth of Galilee and was baptized by John in the Jordan. Just as he was coming up out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart, and the Spirit descending like a dove on him. And a voice came from heaven, "You are my Son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased." And the Spirit immediately drove him out into the wilderness. He was in the wilderness for 40 days, tempted by Satan, and he was with the wild beast, and the angels waited on him. Now, after John was arrested, Jesus came to Galilee, proclaiming the good news of God, and saying the time is fulfilled and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe in the good news. This is the word of the Lord. Back to this. I'd like us to turn to 2 Samuel 30, that passage that was read. Some time passed. David's son Absalom had a beautiful sister whose name was Tamar. And David's son Amnon fell in love with her. Amnon was so tormented that he made himself ill because of his sister Tamar. For she was a virgin, and it seemed impossible to Amnon to do anything to her. But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shimei. Jonadab was a very crafty man. I want to stop here. We'll go and come back to this a little later. But I want us to share a little on stopping the thoughts from controlling you. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you for bringing us together here today. And we thank you, Lord, for your words to us. And we pray, Lord, that you break these words to our hearts and open this word. Open our hearts to receive this word. Help us to hear you and no one else. Help us to respond to you and be directed by you. When we are through in this worship experience, worshiping you with our lips, we will continue, O God, to worship you with our whole being. This we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Stopping the thoughts from controlling you. The story of Amnon and Tamar describes what happens when human beings allow their thoughts to control their behavior. If we are able to stop the thoughts before they control our lives, then this could significantly improve the quality of relationship with God and the quality of relationship with our neighbors. If we are able to stop the thoughts that we have before they control our lives, then we could significantly improve the quality of our relationship with God and the quality of our relationship with our neighbors. This story is chosen today as we reflect on taming temptations, not because the focus is primarily on sexual sin, because persons tend to isolate sexual sin and elevate it as the only sin that there is, and every other sin is less, and every other sin is minuscule compared to that sin. But that is not the case. All sins are an abomination before God, and all sins are wrong in the sight of God, regardless of where you place them. But in this passage, the sin we are looking at is not only about sexual sin, but there are several other examples of sin. But the issue is how one person's desire controlled his life to the extent that it affected the kingdom and people within the kingdom from generation to generation. That's the issue we want to look at. The story reads like a modern soap opera, like Days of Our Lives. I hear about these, I don't know all of them. You may have a little more knowledge of them than I do, but old and the young and the restless. I used to hear that they are also called the young and the reckless. And a host of others. As I said, you probably are more familiar with these than I do. The story is attractive because of its intrigue, lust, deceit, lies, and murder. What makes this story seemingly attractive is the probable appeal to the baser instincts of the human beings. The side that acts without controls, without restraint, without discriminating morals, but intended only to satisfy animal desires and instincts. The story marks a critical period in Israel's history. It comes right after David's adulterous relationship with Bathsheba and the consequent behavior in killing Uriah with the sword of the enemies, the Ammonites, so he could marry Uriah's wife. God's punishment for David for his actions was to inflict similar violence on his family. 2 Samuel 12, that is the passage before. Verse 10 we read, "Now therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, for you have despised me." Can you imagine? The Lord is saying that the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me, and have taken the wife of Uriah to be your wife. I will raise up trouble against you from within your own house. What followed then? We see in David's life that David perhaps David could not escape the consequences of his sin. He plotted and organized and carried through what he did, but he could not escape the consequences of his sin. One would hope that his family members, those within his household, would have learned something from David, and they would have ensured that they did not make the same mistake. But what followed this prophecy was indeed a sad tale in Israel's history and David's kingdom. The events descended into incest, rape, murder against the very weak leadership, by David in his own household, from a king who was normally a very strong and powerful person. So what we see is the kind of mayhem, incest and rape, and even David's concubines were violated by Absalom later in the story. This was the result, the consequence of David's sin against God. How this sin is described, David despised God. You know, you look down on somebody, you abhor that person, you despise them, you treat them as dirt, you treat them as worm, you treat them as nothing. David, we are told, despised God. And so, when the story is told, not to satisfy our appetite for the soap opera type detail, but to answer the question, who will succeed David to the throne? And I want to say that we need to understand what the historical writers were concerned about. When they wrote the story, it is not to go into details, as I say, of what looks like soap opera. They were concerned about a particular mission, and their interest was who is going to succeed David. David had several sons. Just like how we wonder who is going to succeed Queen Elizabeth in England, right? Is it Charles, or we bypass him, or is it William, or is it Harry? Which of them? So whatever happens in the British monarchy is viewed carefully by everybody, because everybody is looking who is going to succeed the queen who seemed to have everlasting life. So you wonder. So the concern here was who was going to succeed David, which of his sons. Amnon was the heir to the throne. The natural heir was the oldest son. And so we wondered if it was him. And so the primary intention of the author was who. That is why there is very little detail we pick up later about Tamar. All we have is the incident with Amnon. We hear nothing else about Tamar. She's not featured again. She is a non-entity. She only rises up at this point, used by Amnon, discarded, and even seemed to be discarded by the text. There's no further reference. She doesn't feature. She's not known. She's not recognized. It is not about her. It's about the men and their exploits and their life and who is going to be king. That's the concern of the writer. So I want you to know that. And so, what we learn here, we have to pull on it or juice it and get as much as we can from it, because we're learning something and we want to get that information. What we learn about Tamar is that she was a beautiful princess, the daughter of King David. She lived in the palace where she received protection from her father, as is expected of someone of her pedigree. Her brief story, as told by the narrators, is that her half-brother, Amnon, also Israel's crown prince, was infatuated by her and desired her intensely. So Amnon she shared the same father with Amnon and Absalom, but different mothers. Amnon fell in love or fell in lust. We can decide which one based on the outcome and the behavior, whether he fell in love or he fell in lust with her. And he was so tormented that the text tells us that he made himself ill. The man made himself sick because of the infatuation, because of the intense desire that he had. He was weak in the knees. He was sick physically because of this intense desire to have Tamar. He knew he could not have her, but that did not quench the desire. We are told that in verse 4 that he was looking haggard morning after morning. So can you consider every morning this man get up? He can't even look in the mirror. Him haggard. Those who look at him, man, why is so distressed? What is the burden? The burden on his heart, he desired to have his sister. He desired to have a sexual union with his sister. And that was his desire, and that was what made the man haggard and completely tormented, completely distressed, morning after morning. Would you want to wake up morning after morning so distressed? That there's anything on your mind that it distorts your countenance, it distorts your day, it distorts what you do, it distorts everything about your life. But this was the situation with Amnon. And so, with the assistance of his cousin, because Jonathan was his cousin, described as a shrewd friend. Some friendly. Because when Jonathan looked at him and saw how haggard he was, he said, "Mr. Man, why you look so distressed? Why you look so packed down?" You know the expression. Why you look so broken down? Why you look so bewildered? What happened to you, man? And he told him, he said, "Man, I desire my sister." He said, "That's not hard. Let me tell you what. Anything you ask your father will give you. So arrange that you're sick. Pretend that you're sick. And ask your father to send your sister to prepare a meal for you." And everything said. That was supposed to be wise counsel. We're going to look at it more at that. Here, so he took Jonadab's advice and he made himself look very sick. And when his father, the king, came to see him, he asked his father to send his sister in order for her to prepare a meal and feed to him that he may get better. Now note carefully, this is an action that is part of Amnon's mind. This is how Amnon is thinking. He's thinking a particular way. there's an intense desire that is driving this behavior. And so the plot thickens, that the thought, the idea, is moving just from idea and concept. It is developing. It seems like it is premeditated. It is developing into action. Amnon has no idea where it is going to lead to. I don't know, it seems. But one thing is clear. He had a clear desire at this point. And so, Tamar came, prepared the meal before him. One of the things we have learned in terms of the physical setting, Tamar lived in the palace with the king, protected and secluded and separate from where Amnon lived. Amnon lived in a separate house, maybe a two-bedroom studio or a two-bedroom apartment. So much so that we get that detail from what you see, that in his chamber, he could actually see in the place or in the kitchen or the area where Tamar was preparing the meal. He could see what she was doing. So obviously it was a big space, but a place where he could have seen what she was doing. He observed her while she made and prepared the meal before him. And of course, that only intensified his desire as he observed her every move. Then he orders everyone to leave and ask her to bring the cakes to him or to bring the meal to him. She obediently follows. Because this is her bigger brother. She obediently follows. When she goes, he held on to her and invites her to lie with him. She declined, protesting that such a thing is not done in Israel. Don't do anything so vile, she says. She said, don't do anything so vile. That was not enough for him. She insisted, but he ignored her and proceeded to violate her. And after his desire was consumed and satisfied, what happens? He rejects Tamar. His lust was transformed to loathing. His hate for her intensified more than the infatuation or the love that he had for her. And this is why, for me, as I said, I want us to look at stopping the thoughts from controlling us. This is the story. But part of the story and the focus of the story is not so much Amnon's action as Amnon's thoughts. Not so much Amnon's action as Amnon's thoughts. Here is a man whose thoughts made him ill. Here sometimes people say, when you go to doctor, they say belief kills and belief cures. And the doctor or some persons will say, boy, it is only your head. Like the person who goes to the doctor and says, doctor, I feel sick all over. Give me an injection. The doctor said, there's nothing wrong with you to give you an injection. Doctor, I need an injection. I'm sick. I'm feeling very sick. And the doctor says, all right, okay. And he calls the nurse and he says, prepare a syringe for me with some sterile water. And he goes and he calls the patient in and injects the patient. The patient lies for a while and says, doctor, this is what I to give me. I feel so good. It's weeks I haven't felt like this. You get the story? That it is placebo, they refer to it as. It is where you give the impression as if you are really giving something that is going to make the person change. But it is only in the mind. It is a fact, my brothers and sisters, that we can entertain thoughts that make us sick. We can entertain thoughts that make us miserable. We can entertain thoughts that lead us to act in destructive and violent ways against our neighbors. That we can entertain thoughts that are undermining of relationship with God and relationship with one another. What goes in our mind is absolutely critical for our overall spiritual, emotional, and physical health. What goes into our mind, that is why we recognize that we are engaged in a thought war. Paul talks about the mental battles that we engage in, the mental battles we encounter. Amnon, he fed his mind with the desire, I'm going to have my sister. And nothing would have changed Amnon from that. If Amnon had just thought otherwise, Amnon could have said, you know something, it is not right for me to have my sister. Amnon could have said, if I wanted to, I could ask my father, and he perhaps could grant my sister's hand, because this may be permitted in the land, as Tamar highlighted. Because in previous years, in the time of Abraham and Sarah, it was the normal practice of brothers to marry to sisters. And we read this in Genesis 20 verse 12. But later it was not the case. So really, David would have had to make a special case in this situation for Amnon to marry to Tamar. That is why Tamar said, this is not done in Israel. But this was the thought. All I am saying, my brothers and sisters, watch the thoughts you have. Watch the thoughts that enter your mind. Morning after morning, you can get up and you can look sick before your family. Morning after morning, you can get up and you can be a miserable person because of what you are thinking. If you're thinking that the day is overcast like it is now, then I might as well have an overcast countenance. I might as well be negative. I might as well think everybody is out to get me. I might as well think everybody is persecuting me. I might as well think everybody is provoking me or harassing me. I might as well think so. And once you think so, you behave that way, and your whole behavior for the rest of the day is directed by that thought. There are some things that Amnon didn't consider, and I want us to look at those things. Something that Amnon could consider as alternative thoughts. Amnon could have considered himself. Who was he as a person? Amnon could have considered, who am I as a person? If I am a child of God, if I am the king's heir, if I am the king's heir, if I am next in line to the throne, how do I conduct myself? How do I behave myself? How do I present myself? So these were alternative thoughts that Amnon could have entertained. Did Amnon think of himself and his worth and his value? Did he think that he had any value? Did he think that he had any worth? Did he think that there's a price tag or there's a price value to his life? So that he would say, if he were to engage in this particular act, what would the consequences be for him? Clearly seeing that Amnon had no thought about himself as a person. Did he place any value on the fact that he was created in the image of God? That he was created as God's person, representing and reflecting God, and was able to make a moral decision in this particular situation? Amnon did not consider any of that. He did not think of himself in the sense, not selfishly or self-centeredly or conceitedly, but in terms of who am I in my relationship with God? Who am I as a partner in the world? Who am I as a neighbor? He had no thought of himself like that. If Amnon had entertained any of those thoughts, he could have behaved differently. What am I saying? I'm saying to us, my brothers and sisters, that many of the times when we behave the ways we do, it is because we do not give enough thought to who we are. Are you hearing me? Many times we do not give enough thought to who we are in relation to God. We don't consider that we are king's kids. We don't consider that there's a premium value on our lives. We don't consider that we are worth more than the world tells us that we are worth. The world looks at our material resources and measure them and say, this is your net worth. To God, you are valued more than the world's assessment of your net worth. But we do not think of ourselves like that. And when we think of ourselves as nothing, when we think of ourselves as trash, and you know that word is coming up. It said, I was reading recently about Prince Harry, I think, who is engaged to this American who is biracial, from biracial parents, and that there is some little contention in the British monarchy that they do not really want her to marry into the royal family because she is white trash. And she has members of her family who have been involved in drugs, and they are not concerned about, they really don't want that kind of family to be associated with the royal family. And if Harry is going to proceed, there has to be some kind of prenuptial agreement. And she resents that. That is a little of British stuff. The point is about how we value people and how we see. Do you see yourself as trash? Do you see yourself as worth nothing? Do you see yourself as dumb? Do you see yourself as valueless? If you see yourself in that way, I tell you, my brothers and sisters, as long as night holiday, you're going to behave like that. Whatever view, whatever image you have of yourself, that is how you're going to live. So when you feel defeated, when you feel broken down, when you feel depressed, when you feel cast down, when you feel that life has no meaning and no worth, it is because you have assumed a posture of yourself that is not given by God. In God's sight, you're a person of worth. In God's sight, you're a heavyweight. In God's sight, you're valuable. In God's sight, you are created in God's image. Amnon missed this. Amnon had the throne almost in his hands and did not think of himself as throne material. He did not think of himself as king material. If he thought of himself as king material, he would not have entertained this thought towards his sister. Because he not only entertained it, but he acted on it. He did not stop the thoughts before the thoughts started to control. Once the thought started to consume his life, that was the end. The rest is history, the decline. I say, my brothers and sisters, when we allow evil thoughts to dominate our lives, that is what becomes of us. He had no self-perception of who he was and the role he played in the state, in life generally, as another human being and as a member of the family of God. And in relation to self, it is obvious that Amnon had no self-control. Did he demonstrate the kind of self-control that befits a leader? No. A man who can master his emotions and his desires can rule the world. Let me say that again. A man who can master his emotions and his desires can rule the world. Self-control is given by the Spirit. Self-control is about feeding the good in a wolf. You heard the story? A grandfather is talking with his grandson, and he says to him, there are two wolves inside of us, which are always at war with each other. One of them is a good wolf, which represents things like kindness, bravery, and love. And the other is a bad wolf, which represents things like greed, hatred, fear. And so, the young man, the grandson, stops, looks at his grandfather for a second. Then he said to him, grandfather, which one wins? Grandfather quietly replies, the one you feed. The wolf that you feed is the one that wins. The wolf that is good, which represents things like kindness and bravery and love and thoughtfulness. If you feed that side of you, it's the same way if you feed those thoughts which are wholesome and healthy and positive, then that side of you win. Isn't this what James says, what causes quarrels and fights among us? Isn't when we hate one another? So when a brother or sister hurts another, it is because of the thoughts we entertain in our heads. It comes from what is in our heads. Once we entertain those, we are going to carry them through. So I ask you, my brothers and sisters, spend time detoxing those thoughts. Spend time flushing out those thoughts. Spend time leaving yourself of those thoughts. Amnon allowed his thoughts to lead to his downfall. He lusted, he failed, he hated, and he not only violated his system, but committed a crime punishable by death. We too must guard our mind. We must guard our thoughts. We must ensure that we do not entertain any thoughts that would lead us to disrespect ourselves, that would lead us to disrespect others, and that would lead us to dishonor God. But it was not only the thoughts of Amnon about himself, but the thoughts of Amnon about sex and sexuality. Sex in our society has received such a battering. Polygamy was practiced in the time of Amnon, but the society had very special and specific and serious moral laws guiding sexual behavior. These were designed to protect vulnerable women from unscrupulous men who very often took advantage of women. No wonder Tamar appealed to Amnon and said, this kind of thing is not done in Israel. The same story or a similar story is cited in Genesis 34 with Jacob's daughter Dinah, who was violated by Shechem the Hivite. So there were Jewish laws that protected women, especially virgins or unmarried women, according to Deuteronomy. According to Deuteronomy 22:28, that if a man meets a virgin who is not engaged and seizes her and lies with her, and they are caught in the act, the man who lays with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the young woman's father, and she shall become his wife. Because he violated her, he shall not be permitted to divorce her as long as he lives. In a society where these laws existed, this is what, in a sense, Tamar was citing and bringing to Amnon's attention. All right, the law is there. After he violated her, he was put in a race. You can't do that to me now. You can't do that to me because I'm in a worse state than before. So you can't put me out. That did not meet Amnon's expectation or interest. He threw her out nonetheless. Sex for Amnon was purely utilitarian. It existed only to satisfy a need and desire. Once that desire was met, he spat out Tamar from his mouth as a person spits out chewing gum when it has lost its sweetness, or a mango seed after you have consumed the mango with much relish and delight, or guinea seed after you struggle to get off the flesh of the seeds. Have I made those points clear enough? You get the picture? This was what Amnon was doing with Tamar. It's very difficult to talk about sex as a gift from God in a generation like this, where sex is presented at prime time period in the days as shaking your hand with your neighbor. What exactly are you talking about when so many people are on the same page as Amnon? This is what happens, as I say, in prime time shows. Whether it is the girl next door, the helper, or the office help, or the junior co-worker, it's the same philosophy. Sex is utilitarian. Its value is that you use the person who can supply that, and when you no longer have any interest, when you have met the object of your desire, you discard the person. This is how this is marketed and commercialized within our society. But I still find the thought by Richard Foster in The Challenge of the Disciplined Life very useful and instructive. He says that our human sexuality is not an accidental arrangement of the human species. How we are created as human beings, God created us male and female. Our human sexuality is not an accident of the human species. Our sexualness, our capacity to love and be loved, is intimately related to our creation in the image of God. That's how God created us, that we can relate like that. Sexuality is about relationship. Sexuality is about relationship. It's not just an act. It's about relating to another person in a loving, caring, responsible, mutually respectful, and mutually regarding and mutually self-giving relationship. Relationship marked and characterized by commitment and care. That's the kind of relationship that the Genesis account presents of sex. Foster went on to make the point that the problem he sees with topless bars and pornographic literature of our day is not that they emphasize sexuality too much, but that they do not emphasize it enough. They totally eliminate relationship and restrain sexuality to the narrow confines of the genital. They have made sex trivial. Look at Amnon. I've gotten what I want. No, Amnon. We could get married according to the law. As to send me home like this is worse than what you have done. That was none of Amnon's concern. I am done with you. You can now go. I have eaten the orange and I'm throwing away the sap. I have had the mango and I'm discarding the seed. Put this woman out of my house. Sex for Amnon was transactional, not relational. It was utilitarian, not a partnership. There was the absence of social relationship and connection. He did not see this other person. Apart from the fact that she was his half-sister, she was another human being for God's sake. When you have the mindset that the other person is to be used for your own desire and need, and discarded when you no longer have use and value for that person, then you will fall into the kind of temptation that Amnon fell into. We have to change the thinking. We have to change how we think about one another. We have to stop the thoughts before they control us. Stop thinking that your neighbor is an object to satisfy your needs, and see your neighbor as a person created in God's image, to be loved, to be cared, to be respected, and be related to. Are you hearing me? Yes. When we remove this element, what is left is less than what is desirable. Is this what is driving our society? I want the pleasure, but not the partnership. I want the benefits, but not the responsibility. They need to have a movie with it, Friend with Benefits. We want to consume. We are not ready for commitment. This is where our society is. Beware of the wise advisors who can guide us in what to do, but are never available to take us through the consequences. You will have many friends who can tell you how to get the guy, or how to get the girl, or how to get the person, but they can't tell you how to manage a broken heart. They can't tell you how to manage a life destroyed by HIV and AIDS. They can't tell you how to manage a life destroyed that is frustrated and it is bereft of all its dreams and hopes. They can't tell you how to mend those. They can tell you how to scheme before, but they can't tell you what happens after that. So sometimes we seek a friend, and the friend we seek is the exact friend we want to tell us what we want to hear. That's what Jonadab did to Amnon. He told Amnon exactly what Amnon wanted to hear. And even if Amnon could have consulted with anybody else, he didn't make the mistake of seeking anybody else. He didn't seek any other advice because he got the advice from Jonadab that he needed. As a matter of fact, in one way I must think that he may have tipped Jonadab to give that kind of advice. You know that this happens sometimes in society and in social relationship. When we want a particular perspective, we tip the person to give that perspective. That's why the Chief Justice has to be independent. That's why he has to be independent, bereft of all political persuasions and connections. When you have to judge, you have to be objective. And you can't say, I remember that it was this person who did this for me. Commitment to honor our sexuality and the value of persons in relationships is what we need to foster, and that will help our thoughts from controlling us. Paul talks about flee sexual sin. Read it. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 18 and 2 Timothy 2:22. He talks about fleeing sexual sin. It is the only sin he tells us to flee, run from. And we see Joseph doing it. And we see others. He talks about fleeing youthful lust. My brothers and sisters, there are some things in our lives that we need to flee. For some reason, Amnon did not take this into consideration. He did not run. He did not flee. He stood there and we saw the consequence. The last point I want to make is that what were Amnon's thoughts? It is not only about himself, that he did not give adequate thought to who he was. It is not only about sex. There's a distorted view of sex and sexuality. But for Amnon, there is also a distorted view of power. Amnon did not consider the element of power. As a matter of fact, he abused the power he had. He abused the power that he had in his hands. This is the heir to the throne. All he had to do is make his father aware of his deeds, and it was done. He just had to say to his father, Daddy, I am sick. Daddy, I need some chicken soup. Daddy. And I could manage that while I was struggling with this particular virus because I don't eat chicken. My wife would hear something else. But some other soup that hit the spot. You know? But the point is, he asked him to send her to prepare a meal. And she came because the father requested. Amnon used his power and his position to get what he wanted. Completely unconcerned about the casualty. Completely unconcerned about the effect on this woman who would be left desolate for the rest of her life. Completely unconcerned about the consequences to her life. This is what I want, and I have the power to get it. David's behavior confirmed Amnon's thought. His father was enraged. But guess what? He did nothing. David was upset, but he did nothing. Many times in our society we have this. When parents sometimes discover that children or youngsters have been abused by adults, sometimes in the same family, they turn a blind eye. Or sometimes they might be enraged, but they don't do anything. They tell us different stories as to why this must happen. Absalom waited for something to be done. And when the leaders failed to execute justice, others take Absalom did. 2 years Absalom waited. And when his father did nothing, Absalom says, it's time. Absalom says, it's time. I am going to take the law in my own hands. He set up the sheep shearers festival. When the sheep shearers came together to shave the sheep, to shear the sheep, they would have a little party, a little festival, and music and dancing and so on. And so he invited all his brothers, and he instructed his men, kill them, kill Amnon especially. And of course, that was done. So you see the murder? Absalom also had it in his head, because his father did not exercise justice. His father did not do what he had to do. He decided to take justice in his own hands. Remember some months ago in August we had to ask, must we block the streets in Barbican to get our wall restored? Do we have to take to the streets if justice is not done? The leaders fail to execute justice. Others will take the law in their own hands. Or often we see this happening, projected on television. We want justice. We want justice, because people are feeling that justice is not done, whether it is excesses of police action, or whether it is failure of agencies to do what they need to do with taxpayers' funds. Whether it is those kinds of actions, it is the same. When justice is not done, people are tempted to take it in their own hands. Where is justice for Tamar? Where is justice for people like Tamar, who are vulnerable, who are broken, who are weak? She spent her life in the corner of her father's house. We have children and siblings who are abused by older siblings, and parents turn a blind eye. We mentioned the classic case that was published in the Gleaner of July 17, 2011, of a stepfather who abused 4 of his daughters for 40 years. 4 of his stepdaughters for 40 years. And they brought a case against him, and they won that case. It was a bittersweet victory, because this should never have happened. That man at 70 odd years had to spend the rest of his life in jail. Amnon's sin is evident here. Amnon's sin was his refusal to take responsibility. He had power, and he used the power in the wrong way. Let me just say something about this power. Amnon used power over the weak, power over the vulnerable, power over the persons who did not have the power to resist him, rather than he used power for the weak, rather than using power for the vulnerable, rather than using power for those who needed that power. My brothers and sisters, how do we use power in our lives as believers? Because we're powerful based on the resources we have. Because we're powerful based on the position we have. Because of the power we have, because of the connections we have. Do we use that power to tell people, you know who I am? You know who I am? You know what I can sign and what I can order and what I can stop? We use power over others. When we have the opportunity to use power to lift up people, when we have opportunity to lift up persons and make them be normal human beings, do we do that or do we crush them? Amnon used power over instead of power for. Power over the weak rather than power for the weak, to lift them up and to give them a voice. Amnon used power to enslave rather than to liberate. He used power to enslave his own sister, robbed her of her dignity, her rights, her self-respect, and her value as a woman. In her culture, she was left desolate and rejected. So his power was used to enslave his own blood rather than to liberate. How do we use power in this church? How do we use positions in this church? How do we use offices in this church? Is our remit, is our focus, is our concentration to use that power to come alongside the weak, to come alongside the vulnerable, to come alongside those who have no voice and give them a voice, to come alongside those who are speaking but you can't hear them and lift up their voice? My friends, how are we going to stop the thoughts from controlling is that we will never ever be in situations where we will not face temptation. We know that, so let me underline that. We will always face temptation. That is why Jesus taught us to pray. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Lead us not into those tests that will destroy us, but deliver us from the evil that will consume our lives. While we are in those situations, this is what Jesus did. This account does not give the list or the full, does not expand on the temptation that Jesus had. All we learn here from Mark, and this is so instructive, he said he was tempted by Satan, and he was with wild beasts, and the angels waited on him. Remember, two Sundays ago we talked about waiting. Those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. The angels waited on Christ. The angels connected their lives with Christ. The angels supported Christ. The angels were there ministering to him so that Christ was able to overcome temptations. I get back to this point, my brothers and sisters. The way to control those thoughts is to allow the Spirit of God to minister to us, to wait on us daily. Allow the Spirit of God to wait on us. The angels as the angels waited on Christ. When we listen to God, when we wait on God, when we learn from God, when we receive from God, we will be at that place where we'll be challenged to stop the thoughts before they control our lives. May God help us to know that we have been given the spirit of a sound mind and the spirit of self-control, and through the grace of God to use that gift according to God's will. Amen. What are you hearing from God today? What is God saying to you? What is your story? We have heard Amnon and Tamar's story. But what is yours? What is God asking you to do? What is God saying to you today? What is the desire that you have that is oppressive and overpowering? That even as you sit in the pew at this moment, you are working out the different segments of that action. It may not be a sexual desire. It may be a desire of another nature. But you are plotting, you are working out how you are going to carry through this action. I ask you in the name of Jesus, be on your guard. Because your adversary, the devil, is like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. As we sing the next hymn, yield not to temptation, for yielded is sin. Each victory will help you some other to win. Fight manfully onward. Dark passions subdue. Look ever to Jesus. He'll carry you. I'm going to invite you as we sing this hymn. If there's any way you would like to respond, to make a deeper commitment of your life, to ask God to give you the victory over those temptations you are facing in your life today, I invite you to come and let us pray together as we sing. Please stand.